Welcome to Alberta Municipal Votes 2025 here on Municipal Affairs. Today we are weeks away from the Alberta municipal election here in the province in October. And that means across the province, candidates are stepping forward with visions for stronger communities, smarter growth, and more responsive local government. And today we are continuing our coverage with a conversation that's for our Edmontonian listeners and viewers. Joining us for today's episode is Jesse Watson, council candidate for the City of Edmonton. Jesse is a community leader, small business owner, and longtime Ward Anirniq resident, with over a decade of hands-on experience shaping local neighborhoods through civic leadership and city building initiatives. With a background in municipal operations and real estate at the City of Edmonton, Jesse brings a pragmatic, business-minded approach to making city systems work better for residents and local businesses alike. So without further ado, let's jump into our interview with Jesse Watson.
Can I just get you to say a name and spell your last name and the title that you're running for, including the name of the ward?
Yes, Jesse Watson, WTSON, and it's Ward Anirniq, which is essentially Inglewood after Castle Downs.
And can you spell Alberta?
Anirniq.
Need you to come a little bit closer to the microphone. You may make love to that microphone.
Okay.
There we go.
Is that better?
That's better. So we're gonna 3. Jesse, thank you so much for sitting down. Do you mind if I call you Jesse, or do you prefer Mr. Watson? Mr. Watson. Keep it casual is the best way that I like to hear. Elementary, my dear Watson. You probably heard that enough. Okay, so Jesse's okay? Okay, so I'll just... Jesse, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about your campaign, yourself, and why you've decided to put your name forward in this upcoming Edmonton civic election. Very simple question to start off the interview. Where's your sense of duty to serve your community come from?
Okay, wow, that's a tough question. Okay, I'm going to start when I was born. No, I'm just kidding. Okay,
Way back.
so I always actually do go back to my childhood because a lot of my platform now is actually based on my past. So I grew up in a small Alberta town, and my dad actually grew up. He was a grain elevator operator, and so we moved a lot. 17 towns by the time I was in university. Burdett, Bow Island, all these small little guys in southern Alberta. But what it made me do is really learn how to grow a community in every new community I was in. And I always wanted to be a planner. So as I grew up, my parents were always, I was intrigued by traffic and intrigued by transit. I always wanted to ride buses and bike and stuff like that. And so then I actually ended up in university in planning. And I always loved what community meant. And it means different things to different people. But I always admired the way you can really build something to achieve a result that's positive for people. Whether that's access to something like an amenity or opening up a coffee shop and making a community a better place. So yeah, my whole life I just really grew up with building community, and so it kind of became who I am to today where, yeah, I'm running for council because, yeah, I want to make Edmonton a better place.
Why?
Why
you?
Why me?
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
We go hard right off the bat.
Hey, that's cool. Like right now, every time I'm asked why am I running, I become more emotional about it, if I'm being honest. I feel like I'm fighting for my life, fighting for Edmonton's life. And not to go dark right away here, but things are tough in Edmonton. There's a lot of great things. Edmonton has a lot of benefits and beauty and architecture, and it has history and culture. But we also have a lot of things that they're not the records you really want as a city. We have high debt, high tax, commercial vacancies at an all-time high, relationships with other levels of government, each other. They're swearing on council. It's there. You can listen. Homelessness, safety. And so I look around and I think about my family and I think about the future, and I'm like, we might not have things that have been important to me as I grew up, right? Affordable rec center access, housing for people. And I think the trajectory needs somebody who has a little bit of business acumen. I have an economics background. I went to university, labor economics, which is very boring, which is why I didn't do it as a master's, I'll tell you that. But then I took planning, right? So I think you can grow a city with a fiscal mindset in the right way. And So yeah, I feel like I'm fighting for my life. And when I talk to people and the more I door knock, I see that there's this tension in Edmonton. It doesn't matter where I go, where people feel that something's off, but they can't necessarily define what that means. And so the more and more it becomes such almost like an emotional journey for me, on how do you achieve a better place through better design, better planning, better fiscal management. And so that's where I'm at.
What in your background gives you I don't want to say idea, but what gives you the understanding that you could make decisions for the betterment of your community? Because you look at your background, you've worked for the city for a few years, you just recently left. What in your background says, my mindset, my opinions would be best served on council to make those choices to better the community? Because we live in a society where we elect people who represent us. Does your background, does your backstory fit into the people of your ward?
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I mean, a couple years ago, my partner and we bought a derelict building. And, I saw what was going on in Edmonton at the time. Infill was coming. There's gentrification, whether that's good or bad, was coming. And so I saw this building, and I remember the first day I bought it, it was on the safe housing circuit. So I had a meeting with fire and housing, and it was essentially a slum, okay? And there was an encampment in one of the units. And so I was naive in the beginning to think that I could improve people's lives through renovation, and things changed and people moved on and everybody was housed. But as I did it, we thought, like, let's do a coffee shop. And the thing about a coffee shop is it's probably the most local thing you can do, because you learn the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I would say mostly good, because in a coffee shop, people aren't breaking up. They're reuniting, they're having conversations. And what it's come to show me is that you can go against the odds, right? Because when you look at opening a business in Edmonton, there's a lot against you. The taxes are higher than the suburbs, it's clear. Everyone's fleeing. I'm going to business mixers, and literally the surrounding towns are recruiting businesses from the business mixers to move to them. Like, it's a legit problem. Businesses are being crushed. Like, our vacancy, there's what the city tells you is vacancy, and then there's the reality of vacancy. Data is one of those interesting things that the city does. But it is high. It's 30% downtown, 33% store vacant. And you go there and you're like, this is a concern. So people told me I was nuts to open up a coffee shop and to spend the money I spent on a building in that area. And you know what? I've proven them all wrong. I've got a return on investment, got an appraisal done. I worked in real estate my whole career. So I was like, I can't be that off the mark, And people travel from all over the city there. And it's actually improved a neighborhood's image. And so I look at that and I think, hey, I know basic economics, right? I know the supply and demand and how the world works. I was at the city a long time, always worked in real estate, always the operations side, because the city is really three things. It's plan, build, manage. Planning doesn't always work well with managing. You suddenly get an asset and you're like, I don't have the people, time, or equipment to do this, right? So I'd like to think that I've seen what's been happening at the city. I see where opportunities lie. It is a hierarchical pyramid. It's hard to make change as just a guy working in a corporation. But I think as a councillor, and even on a micro scale, like where my coffee shop is and my building is, I've proven that you can actually change a neighborhood through very incremental, gentle design and intention. So that's, and as a planner, never worked in planning. I really want to caveat that because half of council's planners right now. But
what are you talking about? 90% of all of councillors across Alberta are planners, aren't they?
Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's probably, hey, we know how to design a city, but we always have to remember that we're designing Edmonton. We're always trying to be something else. We're comparing ourselves to Calgary, or we're comparing ourselves to some European paradise. And we always have to remember that we do have snow. We do have realities that are just Edmonton-esque. And I think we have to bring that perspective when we think we're consulting people and making decisions as a councillor.
Does your background with the city, working for the city, give you a leg up with your other candidates? Because you know how the inside works. You know the belly of the beast. Because technically council only has one staff member, which is the CAO. You should know that. And if you don't, then surprise.
Thank God I know that.
Exactly. What What did you see on the inside that makes you think that you could be a great counselor to help bring the administration to a more customer-friendly perspective?
You know,
Because that's what I hear from Edmontonians a few times when I talk to them is City Hall is out of touch with what the average person wants. You were there. Do you see that? And how do you see your background working for the city making you a better counselor?
So there's an administration team that provides information to council, right? Through the city manager, through public hearings, whatever. But I can tell you that it's never the full story, okay? And so counselors, I don't want to, in fairness to them, they often fly blind, okay? And that's just...
And it's not just Edmonton.
Yeah, it's not a product of it's just a product of a system. So you got to be able to cut through that. And also, there's sometimes that people have backgrounds, they've worked in certain areas, but there's certain areas in cities that provide more value of, I would say, city-esque information. Like I've always worked in real estate. Now, real estate is a vessel of every other branch. And so you basically know what's going on. But if you work in, say, the Yellowhead project in a communications role, you basically are siloed within the city. And so I've always had the perspective of, I'm providing information to council, which is no fault of mine, guys, but not all the information. So I'm able to cut through that. And also the relationship side, because when I look at the city, the operations world gets dumped on all the time, right? It's always, you can do this asset for free. You don't need more labor. You don't need more help. And I actually, part of this journey is like actually the operations maintenance world needs council's help. We need to be able to do better service because when Edmontonians are driving around, their snow's not cleared. It's like, what is going on? We've cleared snow for 100 years. But I can tell you, we're not clearing snow properly because we haven't been supporting the operation to the best of our ability given the growth we've had. And so I'd like to think that, being there a long time, 10 years in government now, being in pretty senior roles, knowing very in depth what the city needs, and I can tell you there's a lot of opportunities. And when I just talk about if I give you something and, as a person on the street, I give you say you're going to do something for us, great, I love it. There's a partnership there. There's going to be an outcome that you're going to achieve. Did you achieve the outcome, right? And often, did you achieve the outcome is never fully flushed out or defined. And so as part of my campaign, I've been, quote unquote, following the money or questioning how decisions are made. And 9 times out of 10, there's never a full story that's portrayed. And I think that's what people say when they say City Hall's out of touch, because people don't feel communicated properly. The trust has disappeared somewhat. And so it's like even council themselves, people have stood up recently in the months and said, we've failed consultation. So we know there's a problem, but we're not solving the problem.
So how do you consult then? Because consultation is one of those double-edged swords, right? No matter how much you do it, as a guy who worked in communications and marketing for a municipality, you can communicate, you can market, you can consult to the end of the earth, but there's always going to be people who say, I didn't know. There's a responsibility on the residents' part to actually do a little bit of the legwork. But from your perspective, do you believe that you could better get a sense of what your ward wants compared to, and I'm saying this because you're running and it's a political podcast, so I'm going to go a little political here, better than the incumbent right now?
Yes,
How
I think
so?
there's a way. So I'll give you one micro example, okay? There is a parcel of land, not in my ward, but it's a historic parcel. And I have people in Edmonton reaching out all over, asking essentially for my help in communicating with the city. And so I've been traveling to other wards, which probably isn't, people don't like it because I'm crossing my territory, but a lot of ward to me is a vessel of a city, right? Like my duty doesn't end at my ward because you might need something in your neighborhood. So when I look at my platform, heritage conservation is important to me. I think it is a city issue. So this parcel of land in 2019 there was a whole community consultation on it. We defined it as significant for the neighborhood that it should be converted to a pocket park, okay? Flash forward to 2 months ago, the city went ahead with a rezone to turn it to housing. Now, why did it go for it? Because it's a policy in the city where we basically say anything just automatically becomes housing. But even the act of going for the rezone without even just a simple engagement to say, hey, community, let's check in with you. In 2019, the City of Edmonton ourselves defined this as important. But we're not going to tell you about it, and we're just going to go forward with the rezone of our own property. We actually have control. And so the community is in uproar. They've had media come. So in my mind, in that setting, it's so simple for a city planner to simply reach out to the community and have a recheck and say, what is important to the neighborhood? Is housing fundamentally the most important thing? And right now, infill and housing is very polarizing. But I think the act and the journey is just so fundamental. When I look at another example, there's a shelter that went into a neighborhood. And people are up in arms about this shelter going in there. And it's about the journey. And often when it comes to housing and affordable housing, people find out, again, it's part of the duties yourself, but people find out and then they, once it's an impact. But I look at there are ways to take residents on a journey to quell misconception about what it means. Because you hear affordable housing and everybody doesn't want it because there's broken window theory. You judge a person inside based on the exterior. We don't hold landlords accountable even though we give them the money. So there's tools you can do in consultation processes to basically bring people on a journey of acceptance. Because sometimes, I actually have a friend, he said to me, sometimes you have to do things even if people don't know they need it yet. But there's a balance on that, right? A shelter might be needed. We as a city might think it's needed, but you can't just, fait accompli. There's a level of reasonableness to engagement, and especially when it comes to something of such magnitude as a shelter, because there's a lot of people feel there's a lot of issues around it. So I look at those two examples and I think there's got to be a better way that I can. The counselor, because you went political here, and the incumbent in that example said she didn't know. And I'm like, you're telling me that 7 months ahead with a rezone, you didn't know that there was a shelter coming? I worked in the city and I knew a shelter was coming. There's no way that you're blindsided. And so it's okay, after the fact, that's where the proof is in the pudding, and people really catch you because they're going to catch your dates and they're going to watch you and track you. And it's just get ahead of it and communicate. And, if it's really not the right thing for a neighborhood, then sometimes that's okay too. We have to be humbled. Not everything we as planners or city council decides is the best for you. So that's kind of my thoughts.
Understandable. But you bring up a good point, and I need to ask this question because it's an important one. While you will be elected as a ward councillor, you have to represent the entire city. And that means sometimes your community, your ward, won't benefit from a budget, won't benefit from planning. How do you anticipate yourself balancing those two perspectives? Because you're there by the elected people of Alberta, but you are sworn in as a city councillor of Edmonton, not as a ward, but as a councillor of Edmonton. So you have to look at everything as a city. Do you expect yourself to do that, or do you expect yourself to look at it as a ward level issue first and then a city issue, or a city issue first and then a ward issue? How do you balance those two?
Mine's, I guess it depends the topic.
So let's talk about housing. Housing is the number one issue. That's a lot of, I'm assuming you're hearing it a lot at the doors.
Never.
No, okay. I was like, really? Okay, I need to go door knocking.
Yeah, housing, yes.
So housing, infill is a big issue.
Yes.
Density,
yeah.
Up. How do we do it? Mm-hmm. If your residents of your ward say we don't want it, but it's good for the commute, for the entire city, who wins? Does the ward or does the city? So
where infill has gone, in my opinion, so you look at planning as just a fundamental topic, right? And Jane Jacobs, this famous planner from the 60s, every planner knows her, and any planner who doesn't know her probably shouldn't be a planner. But she's infamous for saying, eyes on the street's a safer street. Everything's about scale, right? Human scale. And so what's happening right now, at least in Edmonton, and other cities are starting to reject it, actually. We essentially have an extreme happening in Edmonton. We talked about the word, I love this word, missing middle, and we used it as a vessel to get past something as a zoning bylaw. But what's happened is we went from these neighborhood plans, and I actually talk about my own neighborhood, Calder, okay? Calder in 1977 had such an influx of infill at the time, and defining infill was like duplexes, that they struck a committee. They worked with the City of Edmonton. There was a moratorium. to decide what was best for Calder. Okay, micro planning. But over time, we've eroded neighborhood planning to the extent that it's a carte blanche, no consultation process. So in my opinion, we actually have to reverse the plan of, and I get the streamline, and I get the, there's money from the feds, and there's all these nuances and investment and development, but we can't progress at the expense of people and what they feel is important to them in a neighborhood, right? And so when I look at infill as a topic, it is neighborhood specific. So I would think that as a city, we should respect that nuance of a ward, because Castle Downs, where I represent, which is 5 cars a house, is not Bonnie Doon, which another councillor who bikes all the time is, we're not the same. It's not the same typology. It's not the same demographic. We have to look at them as a neighborhood perspective. So I would say, hey, like, we need to bring back some level of neighborhood planning and consultation, because what's happened is it's turned so polarizing where it's either you're pro housing of people or you're a NIMBY.
Yeah.
And it's
Is there a fine balance though? Do you think you can find the balance?
I think
Do you think council can find the balance?
I think with the right team, you can find the balance. I think money comes with strings all the time. And we always have to balance that. And right now what's happening is a lot of municipalities are saying no to money. And they're saying that because they want to retain control of their communities. And it's not at the expense of progress, because developments happen for 100 years. Like Edmonton, we've grown to a city of 1 million people. We're growing faster than we ever imagined. But the city themselves has said when it comes to development and infill, we're already at 2037 targets. So it's okay. The city administration said during the zoning bylaw, they said it's okay to pause and reset and make sure we bring the community along on the journey. And so whatever that might mean, whether it's a district plan, which, I almost think of what's the movie with districts, like District 9, District 12, like this is a survival. Like,
is this like Hunger Games?
Like it's become, people are suing the city of Edmonton. Like, we can't just pretend that this is what we're doing isn't working. And no matter what we do, we have to think about the people we're impacting, because it is investments, and it's not about, do you not care about somebody having a house? Because guess what? The housing supply and the whole, I am an economist. I'm not just some guy talking about economics here, but I'm door knocking. I've hit 20,000 doors, and I can tell you that there's units sitting vacant. They're vacant because they're investments, and there's a write-off, and it's not creating affordability. So we look at all of these nuances, and you're like, what is the right solution? And is building something next door to somebody, and their fundamental rights of ownership, there's a balance there. And I think where we're at now is probably too extreme.
We talk about the affordability crisis a lot on our show. We just sat down because there was a recent report from the Fraser Institute about municipal spending, and are we getting the good dollars for what we're spending? Do you think we are? Do you think our property taxes in Edmonton are being used effectively for the betterment of all the communities?
No, I don't. And what I would say by that is you can see how a service level has performed, right? Is my road getting cleared like it was 10 years ago? No. It's you can go to any neighborhood and see that. And I look at I did a follow the money exercise recently, and I saw a news release, and I thought it was really fascinating. And it was from the federal government. We're getting more money for housing. And I was like, just started Googling this one amount of money for an Edmonton company. And I followed it, and essentially this company got $100 million for an $80 million building, okay? Which just seems weird on paper, okay? Kept going in, and it's affordable housing. So I started asking, well, how many houses are affordable? And no one can tell me. The city can't tell me, the feds, no one can actually define it. So we're giving all this money. And in the end, I've concluded that we gave $10 million we shouldn't have as a city. So I just look at $10 million. I'm like, wow, that's like a lot of money. Like, we could build housing for people. We have so much land. The city has so much land, it's actually unfathomable to define how much housing we could build if we really wanted to, right? We could just RFP it off, whatever we do, okay? So I look at that, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of those examples. We've developed arm's length corporations to develop land, and they've not built anything in 7 years, yet they're being funded by the City of Edmonton. Again, it's, if you look at these things and they add up to actually a great sum of money, but yet as a council we'll say we have no money. You look at just duplication, and we've all seen it. You know, the typical, the road's dug up, it's dug up again, right? We've all seen that tale as old as time. But what I don't understand is, like, if we own a corporation 100% and we're doing renewal and we go through, we spend $100 million, and then a year later that corporation's digging up all the roads to put in the streetlights, there's an efficiency there that's not being found. There's a relationship there that's like, hey, we're spending another $1 million to do this. That's going on the utility bill. So you summarize all these things, you're like, or we put solar panels on a building and they're never turned on. Virtue signaling, I call it, that's what I call it, right? And I'm not against, I have a historic house. I have the most environmentally sustainable house you can have, you know, but I look at all these things we're doing and we want to green, but we push solar panels and don't turn them on. You know, $15 million right there. So, you know, I've already shown you right now $50 million in 1 year.
What should the municipality be spending it on then?
I would say,
is there things that you think that the city is doing wrong right now that you wish it would do better on?
well, I think fundamentally the nuts and bolts, right? Beautification, I think, is very important. When somebody visits me in Edmonton, I actually worry on the route to take to my house sometimes, because I think, you go to other cities and they are cleaner. I think that's an important perspective for tourism and just economic progress, okay? Housing, the private sector will never build affordable housing. It's just not a thing that happens. So we probably have to intervene, and that could be non-market housing competing. There's great examples across the world where non-market is so competitive it's actually reducing market prices. But as a city, are we ready to sacrifice our own profit as a house to do that type of stuff?
And just sorry to interrupt, but I just wrote something about this because that's what the city's not built for, right? It's not built to provide affordable housing. That is what the province and the federal government should be doing. The city should be worrying about the infrastructure, the nuts and bolts, the water system, the train system, the transit, the police, not affordable housing, but we are.
True, and yet this council's been obsessed with the word affordable housing because at the end of the day, the relationships, if whether you like your government or not, you have to work with your government. And I'm sure you've heard this from other people speaking on this podcast. It's like you mend fences, right? And if I tell you you're a bad person, so I've been at provincial meetings, okay? And we've had councillors, I actually witnessed councillors show up and mudsling with a lobby group to call a minister a maggot, okay? And then we expect that minister to help us as a city. That's never going to work, right? And if we want housing to be supported by the feds or the province or whatever method it needs to be, then we need to level up our relationship there. But in the interim, is there truly affordable housing issue in Edmonton? That's a question I don't actually fully know. And it's been hard to define because
what's considered affordable in 2025 is not what's considered affordable in 2020.
You can buy a house in my neighborhood for $220,000. People forget there's an entire north side in Edmonton. We all want to be in McKernan, which, hey, I want to be in McKernan too, but I can't afford it. I don't
really want to say that running for
right? Look, I look at that and, I think Edmonton not only is affordable on an international scale, we all know that, we've heard that, but it's actually quite affordable on a city scale. There's a guy I follow on Instagram. He's always showing condos for $60,000 everywhere. And hey, maybe they're not the place you want to be, but it doesn't define that there's a barrier to entry. So I look at those things and I'm like, if we wanted to really level up, then we could just buy something and convert it. And we can as a city, but we just don't. So I look at that and again, the data, where we're going, what's important, how do we define housing crisis when we say it? Somebody spoke at a hearing and said, how are we defining a housing crisis? What does that even mean? We're just build, but again, it's come at the expense of, I think, trust and consultation for the city.
I want to flip to the ward issues now, if you don't mind, because you've been out door knocking in our pre-interview before we got started here. You said that you've been out door knocking since February, 20,000 households you've knocked on since February, so that's 5 months. I can't imagine what you're going to do for the next 3 months. It is. What are you hearing? What are the issues that, because you have your platform that you believe is what you want to do for your ward, but you also have to hear from your residents and the people that you want to vote, or are going to vote for you. What are you hearing from them?
Yeah, so the wards, I'll start with saying that they're big. They're 100K, and the feds have I'm not bureaucracy, but I'm just from a representation and in fairness to the incumbent, it's a tough job, because to hear all those issues, I think is going to be tough. Am I faster and better in technology? You bet I am. But
always the slight political angle there.
But the ward is diverse. We have really mature infill issues. People who are living in infill themselves having anti-infill signs on their lawns. Okay, we have heritage loss, so it's different. Then I cross the Yellowhead, which is literally a burial in Edmonton. Most people don't go north of the Yellowhead, but that's where I live. You then start entering more conservative type settings, right? It's where it's actually, my taxes are too high, the roads aren't being cleaned. It actually becomes more nuts and bolts type parameters. It's not about bike lanes and infill. It's about my road isn't cleared. My kids can't play in my little circle. We don't need sidewalks in renewal. So I like to think that I have a pretty good touch of, but I'm often humbled at the door, because what is constant to the ward is that seniors are everywhere. And it's the seniors that I find are the most impactful, because they're the ones that don't have the incomes that are changing. And so they're the ones that saying, my taxes have gone up 25% in 4 years. The highest tax increase in history, which, by the way, when the budget was done, which I find so funny about budgeting, we set a budget for 4 years, but then we have 20,000 supplemental budgets. So as a citizen, it's near impossible to understand what's going on half the time, and I'm pretty on top of it, and I don't even know what's going on half the time. But, and then you say, I'm only going to increase it 4%, and then it's 8%, and then it's 9%.
But can I challenge you on that, though? Because while the municipality does raise taxes, I will be the blood. 0% is just not sustainable for any municipality, especially with the growth that we're seeing. The province also has a role to play on that property tax, because they have the educational portion of the property tax. And this is not attacking you. This is just my big beef with the property tax system that we have. The municipalities can set it at 4%, but then if the province comes in and says, well, you have to raise it another 3% because of the education portion, then it's going to be 7%. So there is some nuance there.
Oh,
I just want to make sure.
Except the city's 9.
Exactly.
And then the education, which actually makes it 12.
Yes. But that's the education portion that I just need to make sure that I put out there, because that's my...
And it's a bone of contention for actually a lot of people, because even how you get the tax notice is confusing.
Yep.
And that's totally fair. And then is it going to education? That's a question mark. There's some schools being built.
That's a question for the Minister of Education.
Right. And, that's not something I can't always answer. And to be honest, no one's ever asked me. Not one person in the entire ward door knocking has ever brought up education tax. And what I find really interesting is, hey, maybe it's my ward. Are we building schools? That has come up a couple times, okay? And we are building a school in the ward in Castle Downs. It's going to be a high school. Great, it's underway. But I've never heard someone talk about the province's share of anything.
Is it because they don't know, or is it because they just don't care?
Probably a bit of both.
Okay.
But some councillors,
I think some councillors don't even know that we collect education.
Probably, but some right now in council talk about it at every single council meeting.
Yeah.
And they try to make it something. And so I'm always like, okay, is it something? Is it important? Probably. Is it worth educating people on? Maybe not. Yeah. What's the value? But yeah, no,
we'll get back to the original. Yeah. But affordability is what you're hearing, especially from seniors, right?
Yeah, affordability I think is a topic for everyone, because it transcends the city, right? It's about taxes, it's about grocery bills and everything, right? So I think to myself, what are ways you can actually achieve success? If I look at that house example where we gave 10 million. It's like, well, could we offer a free garbage day once a year to help seniors? I don't know. There's a lot of options we can do. But really, people feel that the base services are not being met. As someone who worked in operations in the business world, they aren't being met. Although what we report might say one thing, but you can just look outside and see, well, these are all full of weeds, and hey, maybe we need to naturalize more. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we got to take people on the journey. But the service levels, no matter where you go, people feel that they're not being met. And so a lot of the money, prioritization, we need to grow, because as we have population, we do need more things, right? Which is why densification is actually fundamental. Infill is very important, but we can't, I had a business, an industrial business, come and meet me. I have these standing coffees, 10 o'clock every Wednesday and Saturday at Boxcar Coffee Shop. But I have these standing meetings.
The link will be in the show notes.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I had an industrial guy, he's a trucking company, and he came and met me, and he goes, my taxes are skyrocketing, because there's always the tax, but then there's the assessment. So it's confusing for a lot of people, even for myself half the time. And he's like, I want you to just come to my area and just see what the conditions of the infrastructure are. And I'm like, okay. I was like, well, it can't be that bad. It's in the city of Edmonton. I went there. I could barely drive on the graveled road was a mess, and there was sloughs everywhere, garbage piled up, no street lights. And I'm like, so we focus on like our industrial base and commercial base as being the highest tax, yet they're the most neglected in my ward. And I'm like, that makes no sense, because that's actually where the money needs to come from. And so again, priorities, right? Like when I look at just basic service levels, is it important to provide an adequate road to a trucking company in the ward, because that's probably going to improve their image, their accessibility, which improves the tax levy, but instead we're focused on putting solar panels on a rec center that are never turned on. And I think that's where we have to question what we do and what's important as a council, because there is only a finite amount of money, but the money is going and we are spending it, but there's a perspective out there and what I see that it's not being managed in the best way.
I'm very cautious of time. We're almost at the hour mark.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The great thing about this, we're about 45 minutes in.
Okay,
so
cool.
I've got to ask one big question and then a few other smaller questions here for a second. During this entire 40-minute conversation so far, 45-minute conversation, crime has not come up once. Mm-hmm. Is it an issue?
I think...
is it an issue in your ward?
So crime, Edmonton has always had a rap when it comes to crime. I think a lot of the crime right now is because of the unhoused. That's what I see everywhere, and that's what I'm told everywhere. In fact, there's one neighborhood I'm walking, and I'll just give one example. There's a guy who has built a bridge between his house and his garage that he sits out there at nighttime with a BB gun to prevent people from robbing his house. That's how bad it is in that one neighborhood. And I see people going up and down the back alleys, right? So I look about, we don't like to talk about the unhoused as an economics number, okay? Because people aren't numbers. But you look at, we spend $1 for housing, but we don't think about the $20 of economic impact. Our downtown is bad. Okay, if you go downtown right now, you probably won't ever want to return. But instead there's a housing first model. It's being done in Europe. There's a couple US cities, and they're prioritizing small scale leases with, again, support with the province. That's a fundamental part, but again, mending fences, and it's proving to be 80% successful. And I think if we really hone in and focus, shelters are important, but we can't put all our money in shelters. So if we focus on that, then you're going to see a benefit on the safety side. So everyone's saying safety. Safety is a priority, but I actually haven't seen one person define how they're going to tackle safety. Yes, police presence is important, whether you believe in police or defunding or whatever the model you is. I believe that we need more presence. Yeah, I do believe that. And actually, everyone in the ward tells me that. They say, beat walks, how we used to have it, being able to just report something casually at the local mall, that was a thing. A police officer just playing basketball with some kids in it, because kids don't even play basketball in the streets anymore. But, that type of approach, more community, just makes the perception feel safer, whether it is safe or not. The shelter, where it is, by the way, people have said that there's been an impact. I've walked there for months. I've never seen a problem. Again, it's perception of safety versus reality of safety. Is there a problem in Edmonton? I think there is. I see the garbage. I see the needles. I see the knives. I see the encampments in houses. Right around my coffee shop, there's 3 encampments in houses, and bylaws done nothing. No landlord fines, nothing. And I question, why are we being so gentle towards bylaw enforcement? And this isn't about totality, control. It's just about, hey, I don't want knives on a playground by kids. And so, the prioritization of that, I think, is really important. So that's kind of what I'd say on safety.
So we've talked about a lot of different issues over the last 45 minutes.
Yes.
And a lot of it comes down to
It's like an
planning.
interview. I'm like blanked out, though.
It's great. you're going to have to make some very tough decisions when you're on that council. And they are not going to be popular with 100% of the people in your ward. And that means you're going to have to disappoint people. While consultation's great, you can consult till the day until you're blue in the face. At the end of the day, you have to lay your head down on your pillow and feel good about how you've done your job. Who wins in the scenario of, I have my own morals and beliefs of how the city should be, and that's you. But I'm hearing from my constituents about how they believe it should be. And I'm hearing from an overwhelming majority. Let's talk about the housing file, right? Because that we saw the debate unfold and we saw the swear words being thrown. But we have a world right now where we have to look at what's good for the entire city, even if that means it's going to upset people. Are you prepared to upset people with the decisions you make? And if so, who wins in that ultimate battle? Is it your constituents or is it you, your moral compass?
Yeah, I don't know everything, and when you go to a community, sometimes the community's right. You have to be humbled about that, right? I don't know everything, and that's why I said in the beginning that the ward, my role transcends the ward, right? It is about the city. Maybe my ward gets nothing in 4 years. We don't get a fire hall because the population and the data shows that on the south side. But I'm gonna have, my hardest part is actually going to be, how do I articulate that in an easy way? Part of this run has been key connections with key people, which I think are representation of the board. But I may not vote with the pack, and that might be based on my own morals. But what I'd like to think is it's going to be based on what I think is representation, skirting the line of, to use a lack of a better word, NIMBYism, skirting that line to say, actually, it doesn't make sense for this ward that I represent, even though it might make sense for the city as a whole and whatever ward you might represent. I hope I never have to do that. I'm optimistic that that the city can do a better job engaging. And
are you willing to have the tough conversations with people, even those who disagree with you?
I am, and I've had them. Actually, I go to not a lot, I'll say 2 doors. Where
2 out of 20,000 is not bad.
Where I've said something and they totally disagree, right? Policing or housing or whatever. And, I don't define my identity at the door. I'm not like, hey, I'm, Jesse, this guy. I just talk about what's important for Edmontonians, but there's a lot of people that don't agree with me, and that's okay. But you know what I always do? I always give them who else is running. I'm very transparent about that. Like a lot of candidates don't know about forums, and I'm sending them and I'm saying, research everybody and ask the same question to everybody, because in the end, you're going to like me the best. But, in all honesty, like, the proof's in the pudding. You have to understand what people are saying. And maybe you will agree with my approach because it's 50% of what you might think is good. So I try to be transparent with that because there are a lot of people running. It's important that everyone has all the facts and figures.
I have done my show for about 5 years now, and I've heard the same thing over and over again, that the municipal level of government is the closest to the people. That means you get to hear all about the provincial issues, you get to hear all about the federal issues. In Edmonton, you have a very unique political landscape. You have a federal conservative, you have a provincial NDP, and then you'll have an independent or a party candidate, if it's you, independent councillor. Can you work across party lines for the betterment of your community?
So I have been very active to meet with every politician in the ward, and actually there's a lot. Okay, I think there's like 12. And I have pictures with them, and I posted actually a picture. Actually, I didn't post it. He posted it. And I was like, how could you be with a bigoted homophobe is what the comment was. And I was like, well, he can't be that bigoted of a homophobe because he's with a gay person. So there's that. And then you read into the history, and actually there's more than meets the eye. And he was a journalist for 30 years, and at the end of the day, he's your politician. He's your representative. And, everyone tries to put me in a box at the doors. I'm asked, are you with the party, yes or no? And what's your ideology, right? And I always say, hey, I think the city needs to be run a little bit more like a business. I'm a business owner. Do we have a social obligation? We do. We need affordable rec center. We want housing, but it can't just be a carte blanche blank check. We just need to make sure we're doing the right things for the right people. And most people resonate with that. Sometimes there's a picture on a post and there's Janice Irwin under me, and other days there's Stephen Harper. And you know what, I like it. At the end of the day, these people are, they can't pick my ideology, because I think at the end of the day, I skirt the line pretty effectively. I just want to make sure that the money we spend is going to the right things on behalf of the people you represent.
So my favorite question I get to ask council candidates is, it gets to know how much of in the weeds you are with your actual campaign and not just outdoor knocking.
Okay.
How can people reach out and get a hold of you?
Yeah.
Is there emails? Is there campaign office? You talk about your Wednesday morning coffees. How can people get
I'm
a hold
going
of
to
you?
start with the phone number, 780-718-4595. Call me anytime. It's actually my personal number, and I will answer. Texting might be better. Jesse Ferrieg on Instagram. I'm actually the biggest candidate right now in Edmonton. I actually hit 1 million views yesterday, so people I think are resonating with information, not just photo ops. But I also have, coffee every Wednesday and Saturday at 10 a.m. I try to just make myself always available. But hey, if you can't make my time, I'll make time. Because I'm either outdoor, it's my full-time thing. I have a family, but everyone's always understanding, and I have a team. But, good representation starts, with one person every day. And so that's how you can reach out to me, okay?
So my final question.
Oh, I thought that was last one.
No, that was the second final question.
Okay.
This is you'll learn very quickly on my show. I always say final question, then you say something, then I have to follow up with that.
Okay, cool.
But this is the big one. I'm turning the microphone over to you, look into the camera as long as you want, take as much time as you want, or as much little time as you need. Why should people get involved, research you, vote for you in October's municipal election, and why are you the best person to represent the people of this ward?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I would say at the end of the day, I want you to think about the most important thing to you in the coming 4 to 8 years, right? And then look at the Edmonton you've come to love, which I've come to love, right? I moved here 12 years ago, and there's a lot of great things about it. But the highest tax, debt, commercial vacancy, homelessness, safety, all of these elements, that thing I told you to think about you might not get. So I think it's fundamental whether you vote for me or you vote for somebody else. The status quo I don't think will work. So I think it's important and fundamental for the progress of Edmonton that you get out there to support candidates who are independent, because the political parties, I think I only heard 2 people at the doors, by the way, out of 20,000 say that they want a party. But if they're elected, that's great. But I think you just fundamentally should support who you can to just make sure your voice is heard, because representation is important.
Jesse, always a pleasure. This is a great first conversation. I feel it's the start of many conversations, if you win, that we'll be having. For anyone who's listening and watching, just want to remind everyone that the links to Jesse's website, email address, phone number, social media pages, all will be in the show notes below. If you're watching this on TV, be sure to head over to crossborderinterviews.ca and check out the show notes for this episode, and you can check out and find out more about Jesse. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Alberta Municipal Votes 2025 here on Municipal Affairs. Now, we want to thank every single one of you who have tuned in and watched today's episode. Now, as an editorial note for anyone who is watching this episode, if you want to be featured on this show about your campaign in this riding, in this city, in this province, we would love to have you on the show to talk about why you're running in this critical municipal election here in the province of Alberta. Now, your support means the world to us, to the listeners, to the viewers who are watching this and listening to this on a weekly basis. If you can, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss an upcoming episode. And while you're at it, why not share this episode with your friends, your family, and even the people of Edmonton as a whole? So until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with a brand new episode of Alberta Municipal Votes 2025 here on Municipal Affairs shortly. Till then, everyone, talk soon.